The sun hung lazily over Lincoln Park in Denver, casting long shadows as families picnicked and children laughed near the playground. It was an ordinary afternoon, or at least it should have been. Serena Reed, a black woman in her mid-30s, sat quietly on a park bench, flipping through the worn pages of her favorite book. But peace is fragile when prejudice lingers nearby. "Got some ID on you, ma'am?" Officer Trent Callahan's voice cut through the air like a blade. What started as a routine afternoon was about to explode into something far more sinister. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe to support stories that challenge injustice and inspire change. 10 hours before Serena Reed found herself face-to-face with Officer Trent Callahan, the morning had begun quietly. The Denver skyline glowed under the early sun as Serena stood on her apartment balcony, sipping a cup of dark roast coffee. She closed her eyes, breathing in the crisp air, letting herself savor the rare stillness. Days like this, free from the chaos of her job, were precious. Her phone buzzed on the glass table beside her. Serena glanced down and smiled faintly. It was Director Elaine Vickers, her handler at the CIA. Serena answered with a playful sigh. "You do realize I'm on leave, right?" Vickers chuckled. "Relax, Reed. I'm not pulling you in. Just a reminder, keep your head down. Enjoy the peace, stay off the radar." Serena leaned against the railing, watching the streets below. "Peace, huh? I'll try. But you know me." "That's what worries me," Vickers replied. The line went dead with a soft click. Peace. It was a word Serena didn't fully trust. Years of covert operations had sharpened her instincts, and those instincts told her peace was always temporary. After breakfast, Serena drove across town to visit her mother's grave. The small cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the city. Serena knelt, brushing fallen leaves from the headstone. Angela Reed, beloved mother, advocate for justice. Her mother's death, an unjustified arrest gone horribly wrong, had been the catalyst for Serena's career. It was the reason she had joined the CIA, determined to dismantle injustice from the inside. But the years had taught her that the fight was far from over. "I'm still pushing, Mom," Serena whispered, placing a single white lily beside the stone. "But some days, it feels like nothing changes." Leaving the cemetery, Serena drove past the Lincoln Park Community Center, where a vibrant mural stretched across the outer wall. It depicted icons of Black resilience: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, and modern leaders like Stacey Abrams. Bold letters framed the artwork. "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." The quote hit harder today than usual. Serena paused, studying the determined faces painted in rich, defiant colors. She didn't know it yet, but by nightfall she'd be living that truth once again. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, Serena continued her day. She ran errands, treated herself to lunch at a quiet cafe, and finally ended up at Lincoln Park, the place she always went when she needed to reset. She picked a bench under a wide oak tree, opened her book, and let the world fade away. But peace, as always, was fleeting, and the storm was already on the horizon. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of children filled the air as Serena Reed turned another page of her book. The world around her seemed at peace, but years of training had taught her to never fully let her guard down. That instinct stirred when she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. 3 uniformed officers strolling her way, their laughter loud, confident, almost cocky. Serena kept her gaze on the page, but listened closely. The leader of the trio, Officer Trent Callahan, stood out immediately. Mid-40s tall with a jawline that seemed carved from stone and an attitude to match. His patrol partner, Reed Holloway, wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected the world back in cold indifference. The third officer, younger and quieter, lagged behind, clearly following Callahan's lead. "Got some ID on you, ma'am?" Callahan's voice broke the park's tranquility like a rock through glass. Serena looked up, eyebrows slightly raised. "Excuse me?" Callahan smirked, tapping his badge. "Standard check. We had a report about a suspicious individual hanging around. Thought we'd take a look." Serena's expression didn't change, but her heart rate ticked up. Suspicious individual. She glanced around. Families on picnic blankets, elderly couples walking hand in hand, joggers passing by. No one seemed out of place, except her. A black woman alone, reading a book in a predominantly white neighborhood park. "I've been sitting here for the past hour," Serena replied calmly, closing her book. "Who exactly found that suspicious?" Holloway chuckled, pushing his sunglasses up the bridge of his nose. "Just following protocol, lady. Mind showing us some ID?" Serena kept her posture relaxed, but inside, irritation simmered. This wasn't about protocol, it was about power, about control. She'd seen it countless times in small towns, big cities, and even abroad. The uniform, the badge, they gave some people the illusion of untouchable authority, especially when wielded against someone they saw as lesser. She reached into her bag slowly and deliberately, not for her wallet but for her phone. "I'm not required to show ID unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime. Are you accusing me of something, officer?" Callahan's smirk widened, but his eyes hardened. He took a step closer, the weight of his presence intentional. "No need to get smart, ma'am. We're just trying to be friendly." "Friendly?" Serena almost laughed. The thinly veiled threat in his tone was anything but friendly. She glanced around, noting how park-goers avoided eye contact, how no one seemed willing to intervene. This was how it happened. Harassment in plain sight, with silence as its accomplice. Holloway's eyes flicked to Serena's book, resting beside her on the bench. "What are you reading, anyway?" "Looks old. Mind if we take a look?" Serena's fingers tightened around her phone. A book? Really? They weren't even pretending anymore. This was about establishing dominance, about making sure she knew her place. She met Holloway's gaze, her voice steady. "It's a novel. Last I checked, reading wasn't a crime." The younger officer, clearly uncomfortable, shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Come on, Callahan, she's not bothering anyone." But Callahan ignored him, eyes narrowing. "You've got two choices, ma'am. Show ID or we'll have to take you in for loitering." There it was, the tipping point. Serena inhaled slowly, calming the adrenaline rising in her chest. She'd faced warlords, traffickers, and corrupt officials in her line of work. But there was a unique sting to facing this kind of abuse at home, on American soil, from those sworn to protect and serve. "Loitering?" Serena asked, voice like ice. "I'm sitting in a public park reading a book. That's not loitering, officer. That's existing." Callahan's smirk vanished. He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, we've got a possible non-compliant individual at Lincoln Park. Requesting backup." Serena's pulse quickened. This wasn't de-escalation. It was provocation. Her hand moved slowly, deliberately, toward her bag. If they wanted ID, she'd give them something better. "Fine," she said, voice calm but razor sharp. "Let me get my ID." The officers relaxed slightly, thinking they'd won. Serena unzipped the side pocket of her bag, fingers brushing past her wallet and landing on something smoother, colder. She pulled it out slowly, holding it up for all three officers to see. A badge, not a police badge, a CIA badge gleaming in the sunlight. "Special Agent Serena Reed," she said quietly, voice laced with controlled authority. "Now do you still need to see my ID?" For the first time, Callahan froze. His eyes darted between the badge and Serena's unwavering gaze. Holloway's mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish out of water. The younger officer took an involuntary step back. The park seemed to hold its breath. Serena didn't move, didn't blink. She'd played this card countless times overseas, but it never ceased to amaze her how quickly arrogance evaporated when confronted with real power. Callahan finally found his voice, though it lacked the confidence he'd worn so easily moments before. That's not possible." Serena tilted her head. "Not possible? You assumed I was an easy target, a nobody, but you never considered I might be someone who could hold you accountable." Silence stretched, heavy and unyielding. Callahan's hand hovered near his baton, but he didn't reach for it. He knew better now. The younger officer cleared his throat. We didn't mean any disrespect, ma'am." "Disrespect isn't about intent," Serena replied, tucking her badge back into her bag. It's about impact, and today, your impact has consequences. Without another word, she picked up her book, stood, and walked away, heart pounding. But expression perfectly composed. But Serena knew better than to think it was over. Men like Callahan didn't take humiliation lightly. They retaliated. The question now wasn't whether they'd come after her. It was when, comment number 1, if you believe Serena handled this the right way. Should she have walked away or pushed harder for accountability? Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because what happens next will shock you. Serena's heart rate remained steady as she locked eyes with Officer Callahan, her CIA badge glinting in the sunlight. His cocky smirk had vanished, replaced by something colder, humiliation masked by barely restrained anger. He took a step back, hands twitching at his belt, as if contemplating whether flashing credentials really changed anything in his mind. To him, Serena was still just another black woman who didn't know her place. "Special agent, huh?" Callahan muttered, voice laced with disbelief. His gaze flicked to Holloway, whose lips pressed into a thin line. "What's a spook doing sitting in a park like she owns it?" Serena ignored the slur. She'd heard worse from men like him, those who hid their prejudice behind a badge, emboldened by power unchecked. "Am I free to go, officer?" she asked coolly, slipping the badge back into her bag without breaking eye contact. Callahan's jaw tightened. He couldn't push further without drawing attention, and the murmurs of park-goers nearby were already growing louder. One woman held up her phone, clearly recording. Callahan sneered but stepped aside. "Yeah, sure. Have a nice day, Agent." Serena didn't reply. She gathered her book, rose from the bench, and walked away, keeping her stride, measured despite the burning urge to put distance between herself and the officers. Years of fieldwork had trained her to sense threats before they fully formed, and right now, every nerve in her body screamed that this wasn't over. As she passed a cluster of trees near the park's edge, she heard it, the faint crackle of a police radio. Callahan's voice low and bitter. "Run her name, I don't buy it, full check, I want everything." Serena's grip on her bag tightened. She'd played her card, but Callahan wasn't backing down. If he dug into her identity, he'd hit a wall. Her cover as a federal agent was airtight, but men like him didn't care about facts. They cared about control, and when they lost it, they lashed out. Turning down the sidewalk, Serena pulled out her phone and texted a single word to Tyler Banks, her colleague at the CIA. Flag. It was their code for potential trouble. Nothing urgent yet, but worth keeping eyes on. Banks would monitor police databases for any unusual activity tied to her name. Serena reached her car, a nondescript black sedan parked along the curb, and leaned against the door, forcing herself to breathe. She could leave now, shake off the encounter like countless others before it, but something gnawed at her, a gut feeling she'd learned never to ignore. The park's tranquility had returned, the officers seemingly retreating to their patrol car. Serena glanced back, ready to get in her car and drive away. That's when she saw them. Two more officers approaching from the opposite side of the park, Kendrick Stone and Mallory Green, their uniforms crisp, their strides purposeful. They weren't casually patrolling. They were hunting. Stone, tall and broad-shouldered, called out before she could step into her vehicle. "Ma'am, hold up a second." Serena turned slowly, her face a mask of polite curiosity. "Yes, officer." Green, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a sharper temper, glanced toward Callahan's patrol car, where the officer stood leaning against the hood, arms crossed and grinning. "We need to verify your credentials," Green said. "Standard procedure." Serena arched a brow. "Standard procedure? For what? I already showed identification to your colleague." Stone stepped closer, hand resting on his holstered weapon. "We've got reason to believe that badge might be fraudulent. Gonna need you to come with us." There it was, retaliation, swift and predictable. Serena's mind raced. She could flash her credentials again, argue the legality of their request, but that would only escalate the situation. She was outnumbered, and the crowd that had been watching moments ago had thinned. She was standing on the edge of control, and one wrong move could send everything spiraling. Calmly, she raised her hands, palms facing outward. "I'm not resisting." But if you're detaining me, I need probable cause. What's the charge? Green's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Suspicion of impersonating a federal officer. The absurdity of it almost made Serena laugh. Almost. Instead, she inhaled slowly and nodded. Fine, I'll cooperate. But know this, every second of this is a violation of federal law. You're playing a dangerous game. Stone's hand tightened on her arm as he stepped forward. Yeah? Well, looks like we're the ones holding the cards now, Agent. Serena didn't flinch as the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She didn't fight when they turned her around and marched her toward their SUV. Callahan's smug face the last thing she saw before the door slammed shut behind her. Her phone, tucked away in her bag, vibrated once. Tyler Banks had seen the flag. Help was on the way. But Serena knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about power, control, and a system built to crush anyone who dared challenge it. The engine roared to life and the SUV pulled away from the curb. Serena stared straight ahead, jaw set, mind already calculating her next move, because this was far from over. The ride to the station was silent, except for the crackle of the police radio and the low hum of the engine. Serena Reed sat in the back seat, wrists chafing against the too tight handcuffs, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the tinted window. Her mind was calm, calculating. This wasn't her first time facing hostility, but the stakes were higher now. Callahan wasn't just bruising his ego, he was making a statement. Kendrick Stone, the officer driving, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. You must think you're real special, flashing that badge like it means something. Serena didn't respond. Words wouldn't matter here. These men weren't looking for dialogue, they were looking for dominance. Mallory Green, riding shotgun, chuckled. Bet the agency doesn't like their agents stirring up trouble in parks. Maybe they'll thank us for finding a rogue operative. Serena's gaze didn't waver. Let them talk, she thought. The louder they get, the sloppier they become. As they pulled into the station, Callahan was already waiting by the entrance, arms crossed, grin stretching wide across his face. He strolled over as they hauled Serena out of the SUV. Well, Callahan drawled, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Looks like the big bad CIA agent isn't so untouchable after all. Serena stood tall, her composure unshaken. You do realize this is a federal offense, right? Unlawful detention, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. You're stacking charges against yourself with every second you hold me here. Callahan's smile didn't falter. Big words. For someone in cuffs. He leaned in closer, his breath hot against her ear. Badge or not, you're just another black woman who doesn't know her place. And around here, we put people like you back where they belong. Serena's jaw tightened, but she didn't bite. That's what he wanted, for her to lash out, to give him justification for escalating further. Instead, she stepped forward, forcing Callahan to move or be walked through. He faltered, surprise flickering across his face before he grabbed her arm and shoved her toward the station doors. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on peeling walls and outdated equipment. The few officers, milling about, barely glanced up, either too desensitized or too complicit to question why a woman with a federal badge was being dragged in like a common criminal. At the booking desk, a female officer with graying hair and tired eyes glanced between Serena and Callahan. What's the charge? Callahan didn't blink. Impersonating a federal officer, the woman frowned. You sure about that, Callahan? That badge looked pretty damn real to me. Just book her, he snapped. Serena stood quietly as they processed her. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal belongings tossed into a plastic tray. Her phone buzzed once before being switched off and shoved into a locker. Banks. He'd seen the flag. As they led her down the hallway toward holding, Callahan fell into step beside her. His bravado had settled into something colder, more dangerous. You think that badge makes you untouchable? He muttered. Out here it doesn't mean a damn thing. Out here it's my word against yours. And guess whose word they'll believe? Serena kept her face neutral, but inside, fury burned slow and steady. She'd seen this playbook before. Men like Callahan counting on the weight of the system to crush anyone who challenged their authority. He shoved her into a holding cell, the metal door clanging shut behind her. The room was small, bare, the single bench cold against her back as she sat down. For the first time since the park, Serena allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her wrists throbbed from the cuffs, and tension coiled in her chest. But fear? No. She'd long since trained herself past fear. She leaned back, eyes drifting to the small surveillance camera in the corner. She knew the drill. Every second she sat there, the situation escalated. For Callahan, not her. Banks would have already flagged her detention. The agency didn't tolerate its operatives being unlawfully detained, especially not when the arrest had racial undertones. Time ticked by slowly. Serena didn't move. She conserved energy, waited, listened. Through the thin walls, she could hear Callahan laughing with Green and Stone. Bet she's rethinking that whole special agent act now, Green joked. Nah, Callahan replied. Women like her. They never learn until you break them down. Serena's fingers curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. She'd dealt with threats from foreign operatives, arms dealers, cartel leaders. Yet this was the kind of fight that exhausted her soul. The battle against systemic hatred, the kind that wore the uniform of public service while crushing those it claimed to protect. The door creaked open an hour later. Not a release, but escalation. Lieutenant Arlene Brooks stepped inside, a middle-aged officer with sharp eyes and an expression carved from years of wielding unchecked power. Agent Reed, Brooks said, voice smooth but devoid of warmth. Seems you've caused quite the stir. Mind explaining why you were pretending to be CIA in my city? Serena met her gaze evenly. I wasn't pretending. You're holding a federal agent without cause. That's a violation of Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code. Civil rights violation under color of law. If you don't release me immediately, you're complicit. Brooks chuckled, crossing her arms. Big words. But here's the thing. Agent, out here we don't answer to Washington. Your badge doesn't scare me. What does scare me? Officers under my command being made to look like fools. So until I get confirmation from someone I actually trust, you're staying put. Serena leaned back, calm despite the heat rising in her chest. Then you'd better make that call fast, because every second you hold me here increases the charges you'll be facing. Brooks didn't flinch. You think the system's on your side? It never is. Not for people like you. The words hung in the air long after Brooks walked out. Serena closed her eyes, breathing through the frustration. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about power, unchecked and unchallenged. But Callahan had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated who he was dealing with, and that mistake was about to cost him everything. The cold metal bench pressed against Serena's back as she sat in the holding cell, her wrists still raw from the handcuffs. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like static in her ears. Every breath she took was measured, controlled, a habit drilled into her through years of fieldwork. Panic didn't save lives. Precision did. Through the narrow glass panel of the cell door, she could see the station's bullpen. Officers moved about with casual indifference, some laughing, others sipping stale coffee. None seemed particularly concerned that they were unlawfully detaining a federal agent. That fact alone told Serena everything she needed to know. This wasn't just about Callahan's bruised ego. It was about something deeper, a system that didn't fear accountability because it never faced it. The door to the holding area creaked, open. Callahan sauntered in, flanked by Green and Stone, their expressions smug. Callahan leaned against the bars, arms crossed, keys dangling from his belt. Still feeling special, Agent Reed, he sneered. Funny how that badge doesn't mean much when you're behind bars. Serena didn't blink. You're making the kind of mistake that ends careers, Callahan. The moment you put those cuffs on me, you crossed a line you can't. Erase, Callahan chuckled, shaking his head. See, that's where you're wrong. This is nothing. By the time anyone in your fancy agency even realizes you're missing, you'll be processed, released, and left with nothing but a bruised ego. And me? I'll be right back out there, keeping the peace. Serena leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. You think you're in control. You're not. Right now, your name is flagged in a federal system. My colleague already knows I'm here. Every minute you hold me is another nail in your coffin. Callahan's smile flickered just for a second. He covered it with a dismissive wave. "Yeah, sure, you keep telling yourself that, sweetheart." Serena didn't flinch at the condescension. She'd dealt with far more dangerous men than Callahan, ones who didn't need uniforms to assert power. Men who understood leverage. Callahan? He was a bully with a badge, and bullies always underestimated their prey. The cell door buzzed open and Lieutenant Brooks stepped inside, her face a mask of manufactured authority. In her hand was a manila folder, thin and unimpressive. She slapped it against the bars. "Your credentials," Brooks said flatly. "We're still waiting on verification. Until then, you're staying put." Serena stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "Waiting? It takes 5 minutes to verify. A federal badge. You're stalling." Brooks's lips curved into a tight smile. "Maybe I am. Maybe I like watching you sweat." Serena stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't sweat, Lieutenant. I plan, and right now you're running out of options." Brooks's eyes narrowed, but she didn't reply. Instead, she nodded to Green. "Search her again. Make sure we didn't miss anything." Green stepped forward, gloved hands reaching for Serena's pockets. Serena didn't resist. There was nothing on her now. Her phone, her wallet, even her belt had been confiscated during booking, but Green's rough pat-down wasn't about finding contraband. It was about power, humiliation, reminding her that, in their eyes, she was less than clean, Green muttered, stepping back. Brooks crossed her arms. "Looks like you're not as dangerous as you'd like us to believe." Serena smiled coolly. "Dangerous enough for you to break protocol. No phone call, no lawyer, no official charge, just you digging a hole you can't climb out of." Before Brooks could respond, the station door buzzed open. 2 figures strode in. Tyler Banks, sharp in his agency-issued suit, and another man Serena didn't immediately recognize. Both moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing the law was on their side. Banks didn't bother with pleasantries. "Lieutenant Brooks, Officer Callahan." His gaze flicked to Serena, assessing her condition before returning to the officers. "You're holding a federal agent without cause. Release her. Now." Callahan stepped forward, chest puffed out. "Like a rooster in a yard. You got a warrant, Fed? Because last I checked, this is our jurisdiction." The man beside Banks, Special Agent Frank Morales, Internal Affairs Liaison, held up a folder. "Federal warrant for the immediate release of Special Agent Serena. Read. Signed by Director Elaine Vickers. You want to argue jurisdiction? Take it up with the Department of Justice." Callahan's face paled. He glanced at Brooks, who stood frozen, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Serena, still calm, stepped forward, wrists extended. "Take the cuffs off, Callahan, unless you'd like to add unlawful imprisonment to the list of charges." For a moment, no one moved. Then, grudgingly, Callahan pulled the key from his belt and unlocked the cuffs, the metal clinking as they fell away. Serena rubbed her wrists, eyes never leaving his face. "You think you've won," Callahan muttered, voice low enough for only Serena to hear. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." Serena's smile was razor-sharp. "You're right, it's not." Banks stepped beside her, nodding toward the exit. "Let's get you out of here." Serena didn't look back as they walked out, of the holding area, past the stunned officers, past the thinly veiled hostility that clung to the air like smoke. She didn't need to. She'd seen it before, the simmering rage of men who realized their power wasn't absolute. But she knew something they didn't. Power abused was power that could be dismantled, and this was far from over. Serena Reed stepped out of the precinct, wrist still aching from the handcuffs Callahan had been so eager to snap on her. Tyler Banks walked beside her, phone in hand, face set in a grim line. The warm afternoon sun did little to melt the ice. In Serena's veins, this wasn't over, not even close. "Vickers is furious," Banks muttered, glancing at his screen. "She's already escalated this to the regional field office. They're pulling disciplinary files on Callahan, Brooks, and the rest of them. It's bad." "Not bad enough," Serena replied, eyes sweeping the street like she was still in the field. They didn't care about the badge. They cared about power, and they're not done. Banks nodded slowly. "You're right. They're doubling." "Down." He paused, holding up his phone. "Look at this." Serena leaned in. It was a screenshot of an internal police bulletin. Her name, photo, and the words, "Suspicion of impersonation and obstruction. Approach with caution." It was marked as a high-priority alert, something meant for violent offenders, not federal agents. Her breath caught, but only for a moment. "They're trying to frame me," she said quietly. "Make me look unstable, dangerous." Classic smear tactic, Banks agreed. But they made a mistake. That alert, it pinged our system. Internal Affairs is already flagging it for abuse of resources. Serena clenched her fists, fury bubbling beneath the surface. That's not enough. Callahan's not just covering himself, he's hunting. As if on cue, a black and white patrol car rolled slowly past them, Callahan himself in the driver's seat. His eyes met Serena's through the windshield, and the smug grin that stretched across his face made her stomach turn. "He's taunting me," Serena muttered. "He wants me to know he's still in control." Banks's jaw tightened. "We can't let this slide, Serena. You know how these things go. If they can't beat you with the system, they'll find another way." Serena didn't respond immediately. She was already thinking 3 moves ahead, like always. "We go above them. Full exposure. Press, agency oversight, everything. They want to play dirty? Fine, we'll bury them in their own paperwork." Banks hesitated. "That's risky. If we push too hard without airtight proof, they'll spin it like we're overreaching. You'll look like the aggressor." Serena's gaze hardened. "I'd rather be the aggressor than the victim." They reached her car, parked a block away from the station. Serena unlocked the door, but something caught her eye. A small black box tucked near the rear wheel well. A tracker. Sloppy placement. Rushed, like someone wanted her to find it. "Looks like they're already past the paperwork stage," Serena muttered, pointing it out to Banks. He swore under his breath. "They're escalating. We need to move fast." Serena pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of the device. "I'll send this to Vickers. Let's see how Callahan explains using department resources to stalk a federal agent." Banks stepped closer, voice low. "Serena, be careful. When people like him get cornered, they get reckless. You're not dealing with logic anymore. You're dealing with desperation." She met his gaze unflinching. "Good. Desperate men make mistakes." Banks sighed, running a hand down his face. "Okay, I'll push this through the chain. You, stay out of sight." "Let us handle the heat." Serena didn't answer. She was already dialing Vickers, mind racing with contingency plans. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever been cornered by a system designed to protect its own at all costs. She'd come too far to let them win now. As the line rang, Serena glanced once more at the tracker beneath her car, the patrol car now disappearing around the corner, and the precinct looming behind her like a fortress. Who was really in control? Now, comment number 1 if you believe Serena's fight for justice is worth the risk. Do you think exposing Callahan and his corruption will be enough, or is the system too stacked against her? And here's the real question. If you were in Serena's shoes, would you push forward or walk away while you still could? Serena Reed sat in the passenger seat of Tyler Banks's agency-issued SUV, the city lights blurring past as they drove toward the safe house. The adrenaline from her release was wearing off, leaving behind a sharp, simmering anger. This wasn't justice. It was survival, temporary, fragile, and fleeting. Banks glanced at her, concern etched into his features. "You okay?" "I'm out," Serena muttered, rubbing her wrists where the handcuffs had bitten into her skin. "But they're not done. Callahan won't let this go," Banks sighed. "Vickers has already filed complaints with the Department of Justice. Internal Affairs is opening an investigation. Callahan's career is on thin ice." Serena scoffed, shaking her head. "Thin ice? That man isn't skating. He's drowning in misconduct, and the system's still holding out a life raft." They turned down a quiet street, far from the bustle of downtown. The safe house was a modest, single-story home tucked between 2 larger buildings, unremarkable by design. Banks pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and turned to face her. "Listen, Serena," he said carefully, "you need to lay low. Let the system work." She met his gaze, eyes cold and sharp. "The system doesn't work for people like me, Tyler. It protects people like Callahan. Banks didn't argue. He knew she was right. Inside the safe house, the silence was oppressive. Serena paced the living room, her mind racing. She'd won a battle, sure, but the war was far from over. Every instinct screamed that Callahan was planning his next move, licking his wounds and sharpening his claws. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Still standing, Agent. You won't be for long." Serena stared at the screen, jaw tightening. No signature, but she didn't need one. The message reeked of Callahan's arrogance. He wanted her rattled. He wanted her afraid. She wasn't. Without hesitation, she forwarded the message to Banks and Vickers, adding a single word: escalating. The reply came almost instantly from Vickers. "We're on it. Stay put." Serena tossed the phone onto the couch and sank into the worn cushions, exhaustion creeping in. She closed her eyes, but rest wouldn't come. Every time she drifted toward sleep, flashes of the day's events jolted her awake. Callahan's sneer, the cold snap of handcuffs, Brooks's smug indifference. Outside, a car rumbled past. Serena's eyes snapped open, body tensing. The sound faded into the distance, but the unease lingered. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward midnight when Banks called. "Got your message," he said without preamble. "We traced the number. Burner phone dumped near the station 10 minutes after you walked out. Callahan's smart, he's not leaving anything traceable." "Smart doesn't mean invincible," Serena muttered, staring out the window. "How long before the DOJ moves?" "Days, maybe a week," Banks admitted. "They'll want airtight evidence before they touch a cop with tenure." "A week's a lifetime," Serena said quietly. "He's going to retaliate. I can feel..." Banks hesitated. "Do you want extraction? We can pull you out of the city until this cools down." Serena's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Cool down? Tyler, you don't put out a fire by walking away from it." He sighed, defeated. "Okay, just watch your back." The call ended, and Serena stood, stretching out muscles tight with tension. She moved to the window, carefully parting the blinds. The street was empty, the night quiet, but the silence felt wrong. Too still, too expectant. Her gaze drifted to the tracker they'd found under her car earlier that day. It sat on the table now, inert but glaring like a challenge. She'd disabled it, of course, but the message had been clear. "We know where you are." Serena clenched her fists. Callahan had been humiliated, exposed in front of his peers. He wouldn't take that lightly. Men like him never did. They didn't just retaliate. They annihilated. The weight of exhaustion pressed down, but she couldn't afford sleep. Instead, she double-checked the locks, secured the windows, and settled into the armchair facing the door, her firearm resting within reach on the side table. The clock ticked past 1, 2, 3. Nothing happened. But Serena knew better than to believe in peace. This wasn't victory, this was the eye of the storm, and the next strike would be far worse. The safe house was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Serena Reed sat in the worn armchair, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but mind sharp with anticipation. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. Men like Callahan didn't let humiliation slide. They struck back, harder and dirtier. Her phone vibrated on the table. Another text from an unknown number. "Still breathing, Agent. Let's change that." Serena's lips pressed into a thin line. No threats, no mind games, just pure intent. She immediately forwarded the message to Banks and Vickers. Within seconds, Banks called. "Got it," he said, voice tight. "Tracing now. Stay put. I'm 10 minutes out." "Make it 5, Serena replied, already moving toward the window. She parted the blinds just enough to scan the quiet street. Empty. Too empty. Her instincts prickled, the kind of stillness she'd learned to fear in the field the moment before an ambush. Then she saw it. A dark SUV parked 2 houses down, lights off. It hadn't been there an hour ago. The silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat was barely visible. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "Peekaboo." "Damn it," Serena muttered. Heart pounding. They weren't just watching, they were moving in. She grabbed her sidearm from the table and backed toward the rear exit, every nerve screaming trap. She didn't need confirmation to know who was behind this. Callahan had escalated. And he wasn't hiding behind bureaucracy anymore. As Serena reached the back door, a soft metallic clink echoed from the front of the house. Her breath caught. A lockpick. They were already inside. No more waiting. She moved fast, slipping out. The back and into the narrow alley behind the house. The night air was sharp against her skin, adrenaline sharpening every sense. She ducked behind a dumpster, phone in hand, texting Banks. "They're here, inside now, moving out." The reply was instant. "Stay low, units en route." But Serena knew better. By the time official backup arrived, this would be over, one way or another. She cut down the alley, keeping to the shadows, heart pounding in her ears. That's when the first shot rang out. Crack! The bullet splintered the wooden fence beside. Harass, Serena dropped instinctively, rolling behind a parked car. Another shot followed, then another, both wild. Warning shots, not kill shots. They didn't want her dead. They wanted her vulnerable, breakable. Capture and destroy. Classic Callahan. From the street, heavy footsteps pounded against the pavement. 3 men, all in plain clothes, but moving with the precision of trained officers. One of them, tall, broad, unmistakably Stone, called out, voice sharp and cruel. Running, "Agent Reed, thought you were tougher than that." Serena bit back a curse. They were closing in fast. She needed an exit, now. Her eyes darted across the alley, searching for an advantage. There, an open garage door at the end of the block. If she could reach it, she'd have cover and a clear line to the next street. She sprinted, muscles burning, legs pushing harder than they had in months. Another shot cracked the air, missing her by inches. She didn't slow. Reaching the garage, Serena dove inside and kicked over a stack of crates to block the entrance. Breathing hard, she drew her weapon and crouched low, listening. Footsteps. Closer. 3 sets, then Stone's voice mocking. "You're just making this harder on yourself, Reed. You know how this ends." Serena's grip tightened on the pistol. "Yeah," she muttered. "For you." Before they could advance, she fired. 2 shots into the ground near the entrance, a warning. The footsteps halted. "Stand down," Serena called out. "This is federal property now. Any further action will be treated as an assault on a federal." Officer, laughter. Stone, confident and cruel. "Federal property? Out here? You're not in Langley anymore, Agent. Out here, it's our word against yours." He wasn't wrong. They'd planned this perfectly. Off the record, off the grid. No body cams, no official vehicles, just 3 rogue cops cleaning up their mess. But they'd underestimated her. Again. Serena backed deeper into the garage, phone in hand. One more text to Banks. 3. Alley. Plain clothes. Moving west. Then she hit send and waited. Silence stretched thin. The footsteps stopped. Then Stone's voice, quieter this time. "You think your buddies are coming to save you. They won't get here in time. You're alone, Reed, just like always." The words hit deeper than she expected. Alone. It wasn't. The first time she'd heard it, and it wouldn't be the last. But alone didn't mean defeated. Her thumb hovered over the emergency dial button. One call and the full weight of the CIA would crash down on this street. But there was still time, still a chance to end this without bloodshed. "Last chance," Stone barked. "Come out now, or we come in shooting." Serena took a breath, steady and slow, no fear. Just calculation. The clock was ticking, and so was her patience. Comment number 1, if you think Serena should stand her ground and fight, or should she fall back and wait for backup? What would you do if the people sworn to protect you turned into the enemy? And here's the real question. What happens when the law itself becomes lawless? Stay tuned. Serena Reed crouched behind the crates in the darkened garage, breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The voices outside had gone quiet, but silence was never a good sign. It was the kind that came before a storm. The moment predators circled their prey. Her phone buzzed softly in her hand. A message from Banks. "Hold position, units 3 minutes out, 3 minutes, a lifetime in a standoff." Footsteps scraped against the pavement outside, slow and deliberate. Stone, Callahan's most loyal enforcer, wasn't backing down. Serena could practically hear the smug grin in his voice when he spoke. "Time's ticking, Agent Reed. You've got nowhere left to run. Why don't you make this easy on yourself?" Serena ignored him. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead. She didn't need to win the fight. She needed to win the narrative. The system had protected men like Callahan for years, hiding abuse behind polished badges and bureaucratic jargon. If she wanted real justice, she had to expose them, not just to the agency, but to the world. Her thumb flicked through her phone, pulling up the encrypted app she used for field reports. Instead of filing it through official channels, she selected a private media contact she trusted, Jasmine Lee, an investigative journalist known for uncovering corruption in law enforcement. Serena typed quickly, "Rogue officers targeting federal agent. Location, Denver, Lincoln Heights. Police resources used for personal retaliation. Tracking device planted. Shots fired. Attached. Tracker photo. Message logs. Booking video." She attached the footage Banks had pulled from the precinct, grainy but damning. Callahan's smug face as he dismissed her badge. Brooke sneering, "Your badge doesn't scare me." The illegal booking. Every second was evidence of a system rotting from within. Serena hesitated only for a moment, then hit send. There was no turning back now. Outside, Stone's patience snapped. "Enough waiting, green flank left. Chet, take the rear, I'll push in." Serena heard the shuffle of boots splitting in different directions. 3 men, 3 angles. She had seconds, maybe less, before they boxed her in. Her phone buzzed. Again, Jasmine's reply, "Got it. Going live now?" A faint smile tugged at Serena's lips. The story was out. Even if she didn't walk away tonight, the truth would. The garage door rattled as Stone shoved it upward, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Serena flattened against the wall, gun steady in her grip. She didn't want to fire. Not yet. Every bullet would be another excuse for them to paint her as the aggressor. "Reed!" Stone barked, light sweeping the room. "Final warning!" Serena didn't answer. She didn't need to, because at that moment, the distant wail of sirens echoed down the street. Not 1, not 2, a full convoy. Stone froze. "Shit! Pull back!" he snapped, voice laced with panic, but it was too late. The first patrol car screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance, red and blue lights flooding the narrow passage. Behind it, 2 unmarked SUVs, federal vehicles. Vickers wasn't just sending backup, she was sending a message. "Denver PD, drop your weapons," an amplified voice boomed, cutting through the night. Stone cursed, backing out of the garage with his hands half raised, eyes darting for an escape route. Green and Chet emerged from the shadows, both pale and visibly shaken. None of them had expected this. They'd counted on the silence of the system to shield them. Not this time. Serena stepped out slowly, hands raised, gun holstered. Her eyes, locked with Stone's, cold and unyielding. "Game's over," she said quietly. "You should have walked away." Stone's jaw clenched, but he said nothing as officers swarmed in, cuffing him and his men with swift, practiced efficiency. The tables had turned, and for the first time, they were on the wrong side of the power dynamic they'd abused for so long. Banks appeared beside Serena, face grim, but satisfied. Vickers pulled every string she had. DOJ's watching this in real time. Callahan's already been suspended pending investigation. This footage, he held up his phone where Jasmine's live stream was still rolling. "It's everywhere." Serena exhaled slowly, the weight of the night finally settling on her shoulders. It wasn't over, not yet. But the first real blow had landed, and the cracks in Callahan's armor were spreading fast. "Let's get you out of here," Banks said, guiding her toward the waiting SUV. "You've done enough for tonight." But Serena didn't move. She looked back at Stone, now sitting on the curb, cuffed and silent. His eyes met hers, burning with hate, but undercut by something else, fear. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, and Serena knew that was only the beginning. The Denver skyline shimmered under the pale moonlight as Serena Reed sat in the dimly lit conference room of the CIA's regional office, reviewing the fallout. Jasmine Lee's article had gone viral within hours, the headline blaring across news sites and social media platforms. Rogue cops target CIA agent in racially motivated retaliation. Screenshots of the tracker under Serena's car, the threatening text messages, and footage from the precinct painted a damning picture. Callahan had been suspended pending investigation. Brooks, too. Green and Stone were facing internal review. But Serena knew better than to celebrate. Cornered animals didn't go down quietly. They lashed out. "You think it's over?" Banks muttered beside her, scrolling through another news update. "It's never over with guys like Callahan. They don't know how to lose." Serena nodded, jaw tightening. "That's what I'm counting on." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Another threat, most likely. But when she checked the screen, it wasn't a text. It was a single live feed, broadcasting from a body cam. Her breath caught. The footage showed the exterior of her apartment, dark, silent but unmistakably hers. A man's silhouette moved through the frame, purposeful and predatory. Callahan. "Banks," Serena hissed, showing him the screen. "He's making his move." Banks swore under his breath. "He's off the grid, no patrols, no backup, he's going rogue." Serena didn't wait for further discussion. She was already on her feet, grabbing her jacket and sidearm. "I'm not letting him take the next shot." "Serena, wait!" Banks called after her. But she was already out the door, moving with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent years surviving worse threats than this. 15 minutes later, she was parked a block away from her apartment, lights off, engine humming quietly. The body cam feed was still live, the angle shifting as Callahan moved toward the back entrance. He wasn't subtle anymore. This wasn't about intimidation, it was about erasure. Serena slipped out of the car, moving low and silent. Every nerve in her body hummed with focus. She dealt with cartel enforcers, foreign operatives and terrorists. Callahan? He was dangerous, sure, but he was predictable. Anger made men sloppy. The moment he breached the back door, Serena was already inside the building, circling to cut off his exit. The faint creak of floorboards above told her he was moving fast, room by room, searching. He didn't want a confrontation. He wanted an ambush, but he'd forgotten who he was hunting. Serena climbed the stairs, each step careful, deliberate. Her sidearm rested steady in her hand, finger alongside the trigger guard. The body cam feed showed him now in her living room, sweeping the space with his own weapon. "Come on, Reed," Callahan muttered, voice crackling through the feed. "You think you can humiliate me? Ruin my life and just walk away?" Serena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The trap was already set. From her phone, she triggered the emergency alert linked to her security system. The apartment lights flared to life, blinding and unforgiving. Callahan spun, raising his weapon toward the entrance, but Serena was already behind him, gun trained on his back. "Drop it," she ordered, voice cold and sharp. "Now." Callahan froze, disbelief flashing across his face as he turned slowly, weapon still half raised. "You?" he spat, eyes wild. "You think you can end me after everything?" Serena didn't blink. "This isn't about ending you, Callahan. It's about accountability, something you've spent your whole career running from." His face twisted with rage. "Accountability? For what? Putting people like you in their place, that was it." The raw truth, stripped of pretense. Callahan hadn't just abused his power, he'd reveled in it, believing the system would always shield him, not this time. "You're done," Serena said evenly. "Backup's already on the way. You can either walk out of here in cuffs or in a body bag. Your choice." Callahan's hand twitched, and for a breathless moment Serena thought he'd go for it. One last, desperate move. But the flicker of doubt in his eyes betrayed him. He knew he'd lost. Slowly, he let the gun drop to the floor. The front door burst open as federal agents stormed in, Banks at the lead. "Stand down. Hands where we can see them." Callahan didn't resist. He stood there, defeated, the weight of his downfall finally crashing down. As they cuffed him and dragged him toward the waiting patrol car, he locked eyes with Serena one last time. "This isn't justice," he snarled. "This is revenge." Serena's expression didn't change. "No, Callahan, this is consequence." Night air felt colder as she stepped outside, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. Banks joined her, shaking his head in disbelief. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered. Callahan, brought down by his own arrogance. Serena crossed her arms, exhaustion settling into her bones. Arrogance was always his weakness. He thought the badge made him untouchable. Banks nodded. Well, he learned the hard way. But you? You just painted a target on your back, Serena. Men like him have friends, powerful ones. I know, Serena said quietly, but I'd rather be a target than a victim. The city buzzed around them, life moving on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Serena knew better. The ripples of tonight's confrontation would spread far and wide, shaking the foundations of a system built to protect its own. She glanced down at her phone, the body cam feed now frozen on the last frame. Callahan's stunned face as he realized he'd lost. Justice wasn't perfect. It was messy, dangerous, and incomplete. But tonight, Serena had reclaimed something more, valuable than safety, control, and she wasn't letting go. The sun crept over the Denver skyline as Serena Reed stood outside the federal building, arms crossed tightly against her chest. The adrenaline from the night's confrontation had worn off, leaving behind a dull ache in her muscles and a sharper one in her mind. Callahan was in custody, but Serena knew better than to mistake his arrest for victory. Banks stood beside her, scrolling through his phone. "It's everywhere," he muttered, turning the screen toward her. News alerts flooded the feed. Veteran, officer arrested for stalking federal agent. Rogue cops exposed in racially motivated retaliation. CIA agent turns tables on corrupt police. Serena barely glanced at the headlines. Public outrage was predictable, but she'd seen it before. Loud, passionate, and fleeting. Headlines faded. Systems remained intact. DOJ's stepping in, Banks continued, voice cautious. They're filing federal charges against Callahan, Brooks, Green, and Stone. Civil rights violations, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. It's a full sweep. Serena inhaled slowly, nodding. Good, but that's not enough. Banks frowned. What? Do you mean? Callahan's done, his career's over. His career, Serena said evenly, but not the system that protected him. How many complaints sat on desks ignored? How many victims didn't have a badge to flash when he cornered them? Callahan's a symptom, Tyler, not the disease. Sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You're not wrong, but you can't dismantle an entire system overnight. No, Serena agreed, eyes narrowing as she watched another news van pull up across the street, reporters swarming like vultures. But you can make sure it never forgets the cost of silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from Vickers. Press wants a statement. Your call. Serena hesitated. Every instinct told her to step back, let the agency handle the narrative, but silence had allowed men like Callahan to thrive for too long. Send them up, she texted back. Minutes later, she stood behind a podium in the building's lobby. Cameras flashing, microphones crowding the stand. The room hushed as she spoke, voice steady but edged with the weight of truth. Last night's arrest wasn't a victory. It was accountability, something too rare when power is abused. Callahan acted with impunity because he believed the system would protect him, and for years it did. Reporters scribbled furiously, some nodding, others watching with thinly veiled skepticism. Serena pressed on. This isn't just about one officer. It's about the culture that shields misconduct behind a badge. If I hadn't been a federal agent, if I hadn't had resources and visibility, I'd be another statistic. How many others weren't so lucky? Silence followed her words, heavy and uncomfortable. Good. Let them sit with it. I'm not here to celebrate, Serena finished, stepping back from the microphone. I'm here to remind you that justice isn't served when one bad actor falls. It's served when the system itself is forced to change. She turned and walked away before the questions could start, leaving the weight of her statement to hang in the air. Outside, the city moved on, traffic humming, pedestrians rushing to work, life continuing as if the ground beneath it hadn't just shifted. Serena stood on the steps, phone buzzing with notifications she ignored. A woman in her early 40s approached hesitantly, holding the hand of a young boy, Malik, the kid from the park. His mother's face was tight with concern, but softened with gratitude as she spoke. I saw the news, she said quietly. Didn't think anyone would actually stand up to them, thank you. Serena crouched to Malik's level, her expression softening. You staying out of trouble, champ? He nodded, eyes wide. You really work for the CIA? Sure do, Serena smiled. But my real job? Making sure you grow up in a world where you don't have to be afraid of people like Callahan. The boy's eyes flickered with something Serena hadn't seen often enough lately. Hope. As they walked away, Banks stepped up beside her. You think it'll stick this time? Serena watched the boy skip along the sidewalk carefree once more. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I'm not done fighting. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was an email from Internal Affairs. Final review scheduled, testimony required, full transparency authorized. Serena smiled faintly, a small crack in the armor of an unyielding system. It wasn't justice, not fully, but it was a start. And, for Serena Reed, a start was all she needed. The sun dipped below the Denver skyline, casting long shadows across Lincoln Park. Serena Reed sat quietly on the same weathered bench where everything had started, the worn paperback resting in her lap. Children laughed in the distance. Joggers passed by and the world as always moved on, but Serena couldn't, not entirely. Her phone buzzed beside her. She glanced down, lips tightening as she read the message from Vickers. Callahan officially charged, DOJ pursuing federal case. Stone, Green and Brooks terminated. Internal Affairs expanding investigation into department practices. Progress? Tangible, undeniable progress. But Serena didn't smile. She knew how the system worked. Sacrifices were made to protect the whole. Callahan and his crew were convenient scapegoats, but the roots of corruption ran deeper. How many? Others had looked away. How many had enabled, ignored, or participated in silence? Footsteps approached. Serena glanced up to find Banks standing there, coffee in hand, face lined with exhaustion. He handed her the cup without a word and sat down beside her, the quiet understanding between them more comforting than conversation. Vickers says you've stirred the pot enough for one lifetime, Banks finally said, half smiling. You, planning on actually taking that leave now? Serena sipped the coffee, the warmth grounding her. Leave? She echoed, shaking her head. Callahan was one man. How many more are out there, wearing badges like armor, using the system as a shield? Banks sighed, rubbing his face. You can't fight the whole system, Serena. You won this round, take the win. Serena's gaze drifted toward the playground, where Malik, carefree and laughing, chased a soccer ball with other kids. His mother sat nearby, watching with the vigilance of someone who knew how quickly joy could turn to tragedy. I'm not fighting the system, Tyler, Serena said quietly. I'm fighting for people like them, the ones who don't have badges or platforms, the ones who vanish into statistics while the world looks the other way. Banks didn't argue. He knew her well enough by now. Once Serena Reed set her sights on a mission, she saw it through. Win or lose, easy or impossible, her. Phone buzzed again. This time the message was anonymous. You made enemies. Watch your back. Serena's lips curved into a mirthless smile. Looks like Callahan's friends are still out there. Banks frowned. You need protection. I can set up. No, Serena interrupted, sliding the phone into her pocket. Protection makes you a target. Visibility keeps you safe. They move in shadows. I'll stay in the light. The sky darkened, city lights flickering to life as dusk settled over the park. Serena finished her coffee, the bitter taste lingering on her tongue. She stood, stretching, and glanced once more at the mural near the community center. The one with King, Malcolm X, and modern leaders like Abrams and Harris. The same quote stood bold against the paint. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a promise. Serena adjusted the strap of her bag, glancing at Banks. Coming? He chuckled, standing slowly. You're relentless, you know that? Relentless gets results, Serena replied, stepping onto the path that led out of the park. And until the system stops protecting the abusers and starts protecting the people, I'm not done. The night swallowed her words, but the conviction behind them lingered. Serena Reed had faced the system and survived. Now, She was coming for the foundation that allowed men like Callahan to thrive. Because justice, real justice, wasn't a moment, it was a movement. And for Serena, the fight was just beginning. The story of Serena Reed isn't just about one woman standing up to corrupt cops. It's about the power imbalance that exists when authority goes unchecked and how easily the system can turn on those it's meant to protect. If Serena hadn't been a CIA agent with resources, training, and connections, her story might have ended like so many others, silenced, forgotten, buried under false reports and bureaucratic red tape. But Serena's resilience exposed a harsh truth. The badge, meant to symbolize protection and service, can also be weaponized to intimidate and oppress. Callahan didn't act alone. He thrived in an environment that tolerated abuse, overlooked complaints, and prioritized loyalty over accountability. His downfall was significant, but it was only one crack in a much larger wall. The real lesson here? Power without accountability is dangerous. Systems don't change just because one bad actor is removed. They change when those with power are held to the same standards as those they serve. When silence is broken, when injustice is exposed, and when people demand better. Serena's fight didn't end with Callahan's arrest. It continued with every person who saw her story, questioned the system, and chose to speak out rather than look away. It's a reminder that change starts with awareness, but only succeeds through action. So, what do you think? If Serena hadn't flashed her badge, would the outcome have been different? How many others face abuse without the means to fight back? Comment number 1. If you believe accountability should be non-negotiable, no matter the badge. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe to keep these conversations alive. Together we can shine a light on injustice and push for a world where power serves rather than oppresses. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, and never underestimate the power of your voice. See you in the next story.